$100,000 for Bitcoin. That's your call by the end of the year. Trading right now just shy of $60,000. How does it get there?
Well, thanks for having me back, Tim and Katie. I'd say, there's a few things that we have to look at. In the previous bull run, two types of buyers didn't exist that exist today, right? So now you have nation states possibly kicked off by Trump's call for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So that sort of ramps up the buying pressure from a buyer with deep pockets in nation states. The other thing is ETFs now, they're gobbling up Bitcoin whenever they dip below a certain point, so they can pull them and obviously have them readily available for people coming into their funds. So with those two, increasing pressures upward on the price of Bitcoin, and the supply being fixed, I think it's one of those things that you just can only go in one direction. Like, barring some type of economic meltdown, the amount of money coming into the system can only push the price up. And I think, given the uncertainty of other currencies as an asset, I think Bitcoin starts to look really attractive to a whole different set of buyers.
Hey, Frank, why do you think the U.S. needs a strategic Bitcoin reserve? I think a lot of people understand the need for a strategic petroleum reserve, but why a strategic Bitcoin reserve, as former President Trump has called for?
I think you actually hit the nail right on the head right there, Tim. Is you don't need to hold the dollar if you're a foreign country to sort of get around or get out from under the petrodollar, the Chinese-Russian alliance for petroleum. You can actually probably hold Bitcoin and settle transactions in that if you have to, without committing to the dollar, without committing to the pound. It's sort of a more neutral way to approach, the current block of currency options available. And I think it's one of those things where it gives people, nation states, some more options to sort of deal with international politics that didn't exist before, especially as it becomes more and more capitalized.
So I follow your argument on why all of this would be good for Bitcoin. Basically, supply and demand, you have more demand coming for a limited supply of Bitcoin, but you also have the call for ETH to end the year at $4,000, and obviously a strategic Bitcoin reserve wouldn't necessarily benefit ETH. Why do you think that ETH is set for a rally here as well?
Yeah, so I think ETH is acting on an entirely different mechanism. The first thing to consider is that right now, Ethereum is near its all-time high in ETH in circulation at about 120 million point 37, I think, or 27. So just a touch under 120.3 million ETH in circulation. That's just about the most that have ever been out there. So it's a signal that there's probably not a lot more ETH being minted into the system. And the prices have stabilized. And just yesterday, the grayscale Ethereum ETF outflows reached zero. So you're going to have buying pressure in the market. You're going to have a sort of a near all-time high in the supply, so it's not going to get much higher. And then the other thing is, with the SEC regulations, Ethereum ETFs can't participate in staking. So for the system to work, you need to have stakers expand the capacity of the network to validate transactions. That's going to drive block space upwards. More block space means more people are going to hold Ethereum. More buyers are going to want to buy on the ETF. So you have this flywheel effect, and you're capped at the supply almost right now. So you could have more ETH in the network, but it's not going to be a surprise. And it's basically, right now, the price can only run one direction for Ethereum.
And I do want to talk a little bit about your company in the time that we have left with you. Of course, the CEO of Metafide, described as one of the blockchain ratings companies out there. Could you just walk us through a little bit what that means, what you do over at Metafide?
Sure. So we have a product that does ratings, which we give away to the community. But our primary business is allowing people to use our FIDE AI token to participate in real-time predictions with AI. So people can actually include human input to predictive AI systems in financial markets. And that's the core business of Metafide right now.
Frank, how well is it working? I assume you've done some significant back testing. Give us some metrics on how well it's worked.
We're running a test with Mantle right now, and we just completed their chain reaction AI competition as one of the leaders there. And it's working very well. Some humans are very good at combining intuition with near-term price movements. We have some folks in there that have won at an 80% rate, which is great because it allows us to include that in our predictions for our institutional clients. And in some cases, we've outperformed the market by 30% over a given 24-hour period when we're looking. So we feel really bullish on it. And I think it's going to be one of those things we're going to be able to take from the crypto markets to the equity markets in the near term.
Okay, from crypto to equity to talking about the election in November, less than 3 months to go. Until the presidential election, Frank, who's better for crypto? Who's better for Metafide, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
I'm not going to try to duck this question like I probably should, and like I'm sure my press team would advise me. I think generally former President Trump has been openly more hospitable to crypto. But I think the real question is who comes in to regulate it? Will the Democrats allow for the continuation of the easing that we saw at the end of, the Biden run here? It looks like things are starting to turn. And in which case it could be that it doesn't necessarily matter which candidate wins, but which regulatory framework is put in place. Obviously President Trump has voiced his support for Bitcoin, the U.S. holding Bitcoin. That's great for all of us in the industry, but really it matters like how do we approach the regulation of it responsibly and allow for the growth and innovation to occur and people start making long-term decisions for investment and things like that. So I'm bullish on either way right now, but I think it would be great to get some more direction out of the Harris camp before forming an opinion on that.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. Like you said, bullish either way. We haven't really heard specifics from Kamala Harris's camp, though, as to what their views, what their positions on crypto would be. What are you hoping to hear?
I'd like to hear them just say, look, we're going to allow humans to innovate, Americans to do what they do best, which is, come up with new and novel approaches to solve things. We're living in a pretty complex world that needs people to innovate. And I think supporting that is the most important thing any administration can do right now.